Hey TCSTV viewers, it's Evelyn coming to you live from the camera store, and I'm going to be your host tonight for a very special event on our live stream. This is Photographic Visibility and Promotion in the Unexpected Spotlight. And tonight we have a lot of work happening behind the scenes. We have our TCSTV live dream team, including Gary and Graham. They're going to make sure that everything goes smoothly, but of course we are live, so anything can happen. And if it does, of course, we'll always update you in the comments. But part of what I like doing about live streams is being able to interact with all of you. And so we want to make sure that you leave lots of comments, any thoughts that you have, lots of questions, and you can do that in the chat. Or if for some reason you're not logged into YouTube, I'll also have my email open and you can send me your questions to evelyn@thecamerastore.com. And yeah, if you're not already familiar with our guest tonight, we have two awesome ladies with us. We have Monika Deviat, who's best known for her distinctive and award-winning nightscapes and landscape images. Monika's photography does not fit into a single niche. She is a dynamic photographer. She also does commercial photography. She's been known to photograph a couple of metal bands here and there. And she's also a workshop leader and speaker, and she's based right here in Alberta. Our second guest is Viktoria Haack, and she's originally from the UK and has been residing in BC since 2007. She has a background in fine art and anthropology, and this combined for a love of the natural world brings a unique perspective to her photography. Her ethos is to tread lightly, observe, and document the subtle visual story within whichever photographic genre she works. And she also covers a wide range from landscape, portrait, wedding, editorial, stock photography, and she also does education. Both of them do some great workshops, and we'll be posting the links to some of their different offerings there if you want to see more of their work, or if you want to also maybe get some education from them. So thanks so much to Monika and Victoria. Welcome to TCSTV Live.
Hi,
Thanks
thank you for having us, Evelyn.
Yeah, now this conversation came up from a previous conversation that we had, and you wanted to have a discussion on the topic of being able to talk about your work, being able to talk about yourself on both a promotional level, maybe an educational level. First of all, could you each give a little bit of an explanation of what you do and why it would be unexpected for you to do this type of role? Monika, why don't you start?
Sure. So I actually started in concert photography, and it was always just kind of for fun and also not even part-time, just casual, I guess. Mostly because I only wanted to shoot heavy metal, which I actually like. And not a ton of bands come through Canada. And it was kind of an accident that got me into landscapes and nightscapes. And I'd say when I got into photography, I didn't really know that people did things like teach workshops or that there were photography conferences. And so the first thing I got into was education. I started doing some seminars and like little in the field workshops. And these days I now speak at conferences, which is both good and scary.
Excellent. What about you, Victoria?
So I started photography when I lived on a small island in the UK, and it was a nature reserve. And so I would head out with my camera, take photos when I was walking my dog or going out with my daughter. And I kind of came at photography from a nature and landscape photography perspective. And then, I've branched out into all different kind of genres. I teach workshops and things now and do presentations and stuff. But I think, for most of us that pick up a camera, we don't pick the camera up thinking that at any point we're going to be doing something like this or being in front of people. So this is part of the photography journey that is completely unexpected for me and something that I haven't felt hugely comfortable with, but it seems to be kind of part of the journey these days.
Absolutely. Now, Monika, you were saying that when you first started getting into learning about photography and there wasn't really a lot that you were aware of or maybe were being able to find, what was your thoughts on being able to see yourself or like identify with people that were offering education once you're able to kind of get the ball rolling and see some of that?
Yeah, so when I started in concerts, I did have a friend who was also a heavy metal concert photographer, a woman. So that was great for me to learn from. And I also worked for her. She had a webzine in Alberta for a while. But when I got into the night photography, that was actually the first thing I tried that wasn't really a concert or shooting people like in a studio or something. And I went out with a guy, Stephen Hancock, who actually did teach workshops, but we just went out to shoot. And then when I started looking around, like who was doing night photography, like trying to get ideas, it was a lot of men that were doing it. And I really didn't clue into the fact that I could teach or like teaching was a big thing for at least a year or two of doing this because I just kind of immersed myself in the actual like shooting and going out and adventure.
Well, several years ago, I remember you actually came to the camera store and you met with me and you said kind of in a shy way that you were interested in teaching and maybe doing some workshops. We had our classroom facility. What was it that kind of pushed you and take the leap to think about teaching photography and like what made you want to do that?
Well, so I have been an instructor or a teacher of some sort for many years, even at that point when I came to you. I used to tutor physics. I'm a fitness instructor. For the most part, it was a lot of smaller scale, like small groups. I guess I did do a couple of physics conferences. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I just figured, there weren't a lot of women in night photography, astrophotography, especially in speaking and education roles, at least at that time. And I thought it might be something good to try to challenge myself. And yeah, I'm glad you guys let me do it.
Yeah, we've done a lot, it seems like, over
Yeah.
the years, some different things. And of course, I mean, your name comes up all the time in our local community of, an awesome female photographer that's in the area and can speak to your work. Victoria, do you think that you feel a sense of responsibility as a female photographer to really put your work out there and to have presence, like to actually be almost the face and the voice behind your work?
I mean, I think one of the reasons why I do this, and I'm not really very comfortable with being in front of the camera or this kind of thing, but one of the reasons why I do it is because certainly when I was getting into photography, there seemed to be very few women in the kind of nature and landscape photography field. And I think at the time, if I think about it, maybe Erin Babnick, but very few women. And so I think, yeah, being out there representing women so other women see people that they can identify with is really important. And I know, in situations like, workshops and things, women will often approach you with a different kind of a question to the one that a guy might. It's nice to have that female perspective as well as the male perspective there as well. So yeah, I think it's really important.
If I can bring up another point, Victoria and I are actually both introverts, and we've talked about this quite a bit. Evelyn, you mentioned I was quiet or shy. I would say it's more like I'm quiet. I'm horrendous at small talk. Yeah.
But then once you get into things and same thing,
Yes.
once you're talking about your passion, then that definitely fades away. Can you talk a little bit about how you've been able to kind of get over some of those nerves? And I mean, even be able to do something like this. Do you have any strategies that have helped?
Victoria, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I've done quite a bit of reading to try and help myself to feel better about it. You know, I was notoriously well, when I was at school, when I was at university, having to do presentations, those were my nemesis. I absolutely hated it. And so I have to prepare. I've tried to kind of talk myself through it. I've read various things. One of the books I read was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffries. So loads of different things to just try and kind of prep myself, and also trying to prepare before a presentation. But my problem is that because my nerves get the better of me, my brain just goes blank. So, like I may know the answer, it may be in there, but actually accessing it at that moment is really difficult. But I did actually take a couple of notes of something that I would like to pass on, if that's okay. That I read in that book that kind of helped me. And one of them was that fear will never go away as long as you continue to grow. And the only way to get rid of the fear of doing something is to actually go out and do it. So to actually go through the fear. You'll feel better about yourself if you do it. I often hate doing it, but afterwards I'm like, whew, thank goodness I did do that. Fear is universal. Everyone feels it in unfamiliar territory. And pushing yourself through fear is less frightening than actually living with it. So those are kind of my little things that I will often read to try and get myself through something that I find quite difficult.
Definitely. And I can completely relate to that, because even these days, I mean, we have done over 100 live streams in the last 2 years for TCSTV. And the first couple of times, Gary, who works behind the scenes, he's always like, we should do more live streams. We should do more live streams. And I hated it. Like, I had no problem being on camera, but it made me sick, like thinking about it being live. But after a while, you just do it. And I mean, we're fortunate. We have a really great audience, a great community, so they help make it easy. But definitely, I think a lot of the time it's more your mindset and how you feel about it. But then once you actually do it, as you say, you just have to get yourself out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually think about when I first started doing commercial photography. So if I went out to photograph a family or something like that, I was really intimidated. I couldn't think creatively because I was really stressed. I'd have to have poses on my phone, things to kind of remind me of what to do. and then the more I did it, the more I was actually able to think creatively and get through it. So I'm really hoping that with practice, it will become easier. I'm definitely not at that place where I feel comfortable, but I'm hoping that if I just keep doing it, then, it might get easier to do.
Absolutely. Now, Monika, in the world of photography today, what are you seeing in terms of photographers needing to promote themselves, maybe promoting like their personality and their interests and that kind of thing? Like, why do you think that's so much more important today than it was maybe when you first started your photography journeys?
Well, I suppose part of it is social media. Again, when I started in concert photography, that wasn't really a big thing, and I think I was a bit slow to get onto that. And it wasn't until I was doing landscapes that I was meeting people that were on Instagram, and they said, "Oh, you should get an account and post your work on there." And then, I built a website as well. And then, as a way to stand out, I guess being able to show who you are and be authentic does help. It helps you stand out. I do usually say I'm an oddball in the landscape night photography genre, I guess, as a metalhead. Also, as a woman in night photography, I think there are more women now, but it's still a male-dominated genre. And I think when you are able to put yourself out there, be authentic, you do make space for other people to feel like they can come in there as well.
Absolutely. Victoria, can you speak to that as well, of how you promote yourself differently now than maybe you did when you were first trying? And was there any learning curve with that? Like, did you have any times where you're trying to put yourself out there and it was a complete flop?
Yeah, I mean, loads of times when I've sort of tried to put myself out there and it hasn't felt very successful. But I think for me, because it's so difficult for me to do it, every time I do it, that is a small success. Just the fact that I've, agreed to do something, that I've taken the stand and, spoken in front of people or presented in some way, that is a small victory for me. So I would definitely count that as a success. I think these days there's so much more than just the artwork or the photography. There's also the kind of cult of personality. So, people tend to, with social media, follow people not just for their art, but also for the people that they are. And I would say that my social media is relatively successful. I've had to use that from the outset because I started photography when I was on a tiny island and I didn't have a camera club to join or something like that. So I use social media as a way to interact with people, to learn about photography and to kind of get feedback on my own work. So I feel relatively comfortable in that world, but I don't like to put myself, kind of in front of the camera. So I will often do things like use my dog as a way to share part of my life or some of the aspects of myself without actually having to, be out there doing that myself. So I think there are ways that we can kind of navigate it. And certainly I feel like that I'm relatively successful at that. Yeah, but I mean, there are countless flops, times when my brain just goes blank. I don't know what to say. I do have the answer in there, but I can't access it. It's scary putting yourself out there and wondering if you're going to say something that's really stupid and people are going to remember it and it's on film, and there's always that. But it's just trying to push through it, really, which is what we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
I think being recorded is probably a bit scarier than just doing a presentation or something, because it stays.
Yeah, it seems so permanent, or absolutely. Now, as far as doing speaking engagements and talking to other photographers, of course, there's always the thought of like you're sharing your secrets, you're sharing your work, your thought process behind things. Do you ever feel like you're giving away too much, or have you seen that it's actually helped you learn as you hear from others?
I'd say I don't ever really hold anything back. I mean, people are there to learn from me, and I think in every industry that I've taught in, physics, fitness, photography, I have repeat clients. So they're coming to me for a reason. and it's different teaching versus doing the thing. So I find it challenging, and I enjoy working with people, different people, adapting my teaching to what works best for them. But that's also a little bit of a learned skill, and not everyone wants to learn that or wants to be able to do that, right? So I think it's fine to share all your knowledge.
I
Except
think
Victoria will probably bring up that point.
well, no, I was just going to say, I think we all, you can share your knowledge, but everybody's still going to come at it from a different point of view. So whatever you share with people, people tend to have their own unique vision. And so I think, worrying about what you share is not something that I am too concerned about. The only thing I'm not that keen on sharing is things like locations and things, obviously from point of view of kind of the conservation aspect of that. But yeah, I think if you share, you do build trust with people, and obviously that works for you as well if you're a workshop leader, or that can create clients for you.
There's also so much information on the internet. Like, realistically, if you really wanted to find something, you probably could. However, that's different than going for an experience. And also will probably save you a bit of time than searching on the internet.
Absolutely. We have a question here in the chat from Brett Machoud.
Oh, no, Brett. We told him to be nice.
I know that both of you spend a fair bit of time promoting yourselves, your tours and classes on social media. How effective do you feel this is to bringing in new business? Victoria, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, social media is my shop window, pretty much. I use it a lot, and it does seem to work really well. So yeah, it's not quite sure what to sort of add to that, but it definitely, using Instagram stories and because I think, as we mentioned before, when people get to know something of you as well, it's not just your work. They're figuring out what kind of person you are. Do they want to spend, a week with you in a place? Is it going to be, if you want to go to Scotland with me, am I going to be nice to spend, 8 days with or something? So I think, you can learn about your instructor or the photographer in that way as well. So it definitely works for me, and I use it a lot.
Yeah, I think it works for me as well. And sometimes I think it's kind of a way for people to research and learn about you for a little bit before they commit to something, because some of the workshops are an investment, right? They're a big experience, especially if you're traveling far. Yeah, people can kind of get to know you a little bit, see if you'll get along. If they like your work, that's easy to see on something like social media. But
totally. So
then behind the scenes of other workshops.
Could you be specific in some of the ways that you're able to show like your personality and who you are, like some of your other interests? Like I know, Monika, you've shared sometimes for some of your workshops, you share like some food from your heritage, from your culture. Like what kind of things are you sharing, and what do you think has been the most successful?
Yeah, the behind the scenes stuff is great because people see how other participants are interacting, having fun, what you're actually doing at the workshop, what kind of conditions you get. If you don't have great conditions, what do you do, right? Like, there's always something to shoot. There's always fun things to look at and get creative with. Yeah, and then with my the one that you're bringing up about the food, my Abraham Lake Bubbles workshop, because it happens right around Christmas. My participants do get homemade pierogies because we make hundreds of those around Christmas time.
That's awesome. And what about you, Victoria? What kind of personal things are you sharing? Like, what are you putting together, and how are you displaying that on Instagram or any other social feeds?
I think, not just, it's not just workshop things that will sell a workshop. Sometimes it's, knowing the kind of person that you are, knowing that maybe you care about nature, or, some of the things that you're passionate about in terms of conservation or animal welfare or something. All of those things come together to let people know the kind of person that you are and whether or not they'd want to spend time with you. So I think all of that stuff is quite valid to share. And I think you can be creative about how you do it. I don't think you have to, well, certainly I work around the having to stand in front of a camera and say those things. So there are different ways that you can approach that that don't necessarily mean that you have to put yourself in front of the camera to do it. So yeah, I think you can be creative and get the message across.
So Monika, we've had some conversations before about your night photography, and you said it's great, we're seeing more and more female photographers getting into it, but what are some of the things that would sometimes hold back women from exploring this genre of photography, especially like going out at night, in some cases maybe alone in places that have, animals, wildlife, things like that. And what would you say to that? How do you overcome some of those types of fears?
Yeah, I mean, night photography is a risky one and it's a scary one. It is dark. You can't really see everything. There are a lot of risks, like you mentioned, wildlife. I'd say though, like rural areas are the ones that make me the most nervous because there's humans around. But now, like in terms of when I go out in the mountains, and I do go out a lot on my own, what has helped me is just to feel prepared and to have done the research. So when I got into this, I basically started hiking because I wanted to shoot the Milky Way from the top of a mountain. So my first season of hiking, I did like 40 summits, and that was just to get mileage under me, learn route finding, get really familiar and comfortable out there. And of course, like knowing how to use bear spray, learning about wildlife, which has also helped for photographing wildlife, but also how they behave and what to watch for. Make sure you're loud, which I know is weird for me because I said I'm quiet, but I still haven't come across any creatures in the night except deer. So I don't know. I usually yell heavy metal lyrics, so maybe that's scary enough.
That's perfect.
But yeah, I think being prepared and probably going with a friend is safer and better if you can.
Definitely.
I think that can be, just to add to that, a bit of an issue sometimes in the landscape and nature photography world when there are sometimes fewer women or to do those things with. There seems to be, sometimes less women doing it than guys. So sometimes, you're in a position of wanting to take someone, but then there's nobody around who wants to do the same kind of thing. So that can be difficult, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good idea. And I have my dog with me a lot too, which makes me feel a bit safer. But it's definitely, I think, one of the things that prevents certainly some women from doing some of those activities because they can feel a little bit unsafe. But I know coming from the UK, where it's a much more urban environment, we were always much more concerned about humans. But here I had to get used to the animal aspect, being out in the wild with bears and things like that. But yeah, bear spray is good. How to use it.
Yeah, we have a question here from Catherine. When promoting yourself on social media, which one do you find is the most successful? So which social media channel these days is working the best for you? Monika?
Well, Instagram probably for the landscape, night photography, workshops, stuff like that. Then I use Facebook for kind of everything. Like I'll post everything on there, but I find on Instagram, like if I was posting heavy metal bands alongside like my night stuff, alongside weddings and commercial, I think my engagement would tank, unfortunately, just how the algorithms are set up. So
you still see some benefit in kind of keeping a bit of like a niche or some consistency and like flavor to what you're posting in the feed?
For mine. And then I use the stories, like on my stories, sometimes I'll share like, oh, I went and photographed Death Angel. Here's 4 shots of all the band members or something like, but I won't actually post it in the feed.
Fair enough. What about you, Victoria?
I think because I was using Facebook obviously first, and then I started using Instagram, and I feel like Instagram was the platform that allowed me to connect more with other sometimes for ambassadorships and things like that too. So being able to connect, Instagram was definitely better. And I'm probably the opposite to Monika in that my feed is pretty broad. So I try to include not just my landscape and nature stuff, but also, a bit of wedding stuff, portraits and that kind of thing. So I've always tried to keep my feed quite broad, because I want to be able to post anything. But I think that what comes along with that is the knowledge that you may not have such a great reaction from people for certain things that you post. And as long as you're okay with that. But, I'm not too worried about how many likes I get. I just want to make sure that I can still share the things that I want to share. So.
And what about, do you have any consistency on how you post, like in terms of the types of captions that you use and tags and things like that? Like, what do you find works the best for getting, I guess, the most traction for you?
I tend to post every day if I can. So I try and post consistently. I have changed the times of day, so I'm not too worried about that. And then I tend to, try and vary up things like hashtags, but I find the easiest thing to do is have in my notes on my phone, I'll have a bunch of different hashtags that work well for different types of imagery. And then I tend to not pre-plan particularly. I just post whatever I'm feeling like on the day, but then I can go into my notes and select a bunch of hashtags that I think might work for that image, and that's what I do.
I'm very inconsistent on posting, but then I do the similar thing with the hashtags where I have sets that I can pull from, which makes it much easier,
That seems
faster.
to work, yeah. Nice. Now, when you're finding yourself being recognized more so, like at different events and things like that, what kind of benefits have you seen or comments have you gotten when you've done presentations and have put yourself out there? What are people saying to you, and like how have you influenced others?
Ooh, can I read a quote we got from Light
Yes,
Chasers?
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, I found it. It's not the actual email because I couldn't find that, but I found the note I made, so hopefully it is correctly transcribed. But this was from Cassandra after the Light Chasers conference last year. And it reads, I really appreciate, she wrote this to Shane, who was the organizer. Really appreciated that you included several female photographers and an Indigenous presenter. As a millennial female, I don't always see myself reflected in the broader photography community, which can make it quite intimidating. However, seeing those voices represented at Light Chasers was so uplifting. I found Monika, Victoria, and Beth's presentations particularly inspiring. So, feelings.
I was going to say, how did that make you feel? Like, how did that impact you?
It was, I know by the time Light Chasers conference finished last year, we were kind of emotionally wrought and tired. We were quite sort of tearful really at that. It was a really nice response to get, wasn't it?
Yeah. It kind of made all the stress and worry worthwhile, because with Light Chasers, it was the first big conference I had done since COVID. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we really felt that pressure, I think.
We did. Yeah. By the end of it, we were a bit of a mess, but that was a very nice email to get. And it does make things worthwhile when you feel like you are potentially opening doors for other people and they're seeing people like themselves out there.
Yeah, well, and before we started live streaming, I was asking you if you were going to attend or like be part of the conference. I put the link in the chat as well, so if people want to check out what the Light Chasers conference is all about. It's in Alberta in Pincher Creek. It's coming up in May, so definitely check that out. The camera store is going to be involved in that as well. But Shane is the organizer, as you said, but it is a wonderful community that's developing from this conference, and so it's great to see. And actually, Adam Clark just commented that it was an amazing conference, and you both were fantastic presenters. I'm also curious, like for some of your own education, I mean, you guys have done a lot of workshops where you end up spending quite a bit of time with people. Do you find that it enriches you in terms of relationships and friendships when you have people that sign on and actually want to spend that kind of time with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went to Scotland in the fall, and we're still in a little group chat. The group of us, we had a really great group of people. And I think being able to keep contact with those people, for them to be able to ask you things. I know, Monika, you have a group on Facebook of past workshop participants where they can interact with you, and you can all kind of chat together as well, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me being very introverted and spending a lot of time on my own, it is kind of nice to have those little bursts of socialization with people that are also into photography. And, we spend a lot of time learning and working on techniques and stuff, but it's also great to learn from them. Even just the types of questions they're asking, or just seeing how everyone approaches things differently, how we all discuss things differently, and what someone will pick out versus another person. It's always quite interesting, quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, I think, the sharing of information, I certainly learn from my workshop participants. And I think they learn from each other as well. That community is really important.
Have you ever had to like put up any like strong boundaries, or do you sometimes have people that maybe want to be like too connected, or like by putting yourself out there, is that ever something that you have to contend with?
I'm fine with it. I really like that kind of interaction. I mean, sometimes if you're busy, it can be hard, but to try and keep conversing with people. But I usually let people, if I'm away on a trip or something, or I'm busy, I usually just say, sorry guys,
I'm out of here.
I'm going to be MIA for, a couple of weeks because I'm doing something. But I really like that connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the only thing I do as again, introvert, I do manage my breaks. So I always make sure there's an hour to myself just to recharge. But otherwise, like I'm usually prepared for it. Same with like having to have a phone call. It helps if I know it's coming and I'm prepared for it. Like I'm prepared for the workshop weekend. I'm prepared to be with people. Um, but yeah, I do need to recharge usually.
That's good. Well, and if it sounds like both in your photography work, but then also your interactions, whether it's workshops or other events, you're planning and you're using that strategy to make sure that you're protecting yourself and also like your time and your needs as well. So you're not
Yeah,
just
because
go
I do
go
want
go all
everyone
the
to have
time.
a good, yeah. Well, for me, it's important for everyone to have a good time. And so I know if like I don't take care of that aspect of my personality, it might be detrimental. But so yeah, planning, preparing, workshops, speaking, conferences, it's important.
And I think, what Monica said about, if you are an introvert, you have to allocate that space for yourself. And so I know for me, with social media, I don't have things like notifications turned on. I choose my time to be interactive, and then I have my time when I'm not. And so I can separate the two, and I have that time to recharge. So, yeah.
Has there been any other benefits that you've realized in your photography work by putting yourself out there and doing different kinds of speaking engagements?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, some of the ambassadorships have been great to kind of get as well. That I think that some of that has come as a result of speaking and putting myself out there too. And you know what we've already said. You can also bring along work different clients. Clients for a photo shoot, clients for a workshop. I think when you pop up regularly, you remind people that you're there, and then when you share something of your personality as well, all of those things can help to create more business if that's what you're wanting to do.
We
Yeah,
have a
there.
question here. Oh, sorry, Monica, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been opportunities that have come up that I didn't expect. So, I mean, I've gone after some things when I'm like, oh, I'd like to try doing this, like doing the night photography seminar with you guys. Um, and then, during workshops. But last year, Nikon Canada asked me to be their speaker at the Banff Mountain Film Festival, which I thought, to me, that was a big deal. Like, I felt very honored that they would trust me with that. Um, so that was pretty cool. And not something I ever thought of doing, right? Especially before photography or even when I started, like to speak at an event like that.
You know, I've been working for the camera store for almost 16 years, and I've seen a lot of photographers, not to like toot our own horn, but a lot of photographers that get started sometimes with seminars, like not necessarily a small feat on its own, but people that just start to put themselves out there. And what we see happen is those photographers become top of mind for lots of other types of events, conferences. They're the people that get recommended because we've been able to see them present, and it kind of, I think it snowballs. Can you attest to that? Like, did it seem like it really snowballed for you as you did more?
Yeah, I think it did in a way. Yeah. And you guys do have a really great community and you do support photographers really well. So thank you.
Good. There's a question here in the chat from Alan. Do your guests find do you find in workshops and at conferences that female photographers ask different types of questions and are seeking different advice and instruction than men do?
I think sometimes, yeah. And I think just the fact that I mean, I don't want to say that women are less technical, or I mean, look at Monika, she's a physicist, and like there isn't, but sometimes I think having somebody that you feel you can approach a bit more easily means that you can ask a question that you might otherwise feel was a bit stupid, So I noticed at Light Chasers the number of women coming up and asking questions, and obviously feeling very comfortable because of the broad spectrum of presenters that were there. So that was something that was really nice to see.
And Harold has a comment about hearing more about your that he did hear more about you through a West Coast Photography Club a few weeks ago, and was wondering if you offer any mentoring sessions, any kind of private education.
Was that directed at me or
you?
Monika?
I think that was directed to you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, did you say to both of us?
No, I think to you.
That one was
to
to
me.
you.
Do I? Yes, I do. I do offer mentoring sessions too. Yeah, which is a really nice way to, just individually connect with someone. I mean, yesterday I spent 2 hours in a coffee shop with a young woman who is kind of starting off on her photography journey, and helping her with things like her camera and how to use it, but also just the kind of the mindset to go with it. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to tailor a session to whatever that person wants, and it can go in any direction, which is really interesting.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap things up tonight, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some other ways that people can hear from you and interact. I'm going to post links to both of your websites, but Monika, what do you have coming up in this next year that people could join?
Oh, yes. Well, I guess the next workshop that actually has space in it is the one with Victoria, Escape to Nature, Waterton. That's happening right after Light Chasers, so it starts May 29th. And with this one, I mean, Victoria and I knew each other a little bit before Light Chasers. Actually, the first time I met her, every time I ran into her, I was alone. But the first time I was getting off the helicopter going into Assiniboine, and they were heading out. And so I got a really quick meet and greet through a mutual friend of ours. And then, we ran into each other a few times, Moraine Lake, Lake O'Hara, and then we got to chatting a little bit. And I don't know, I felt like I connected well with Victoria, and I really loved how she approaches things and just sees things, and she just loves nature. And I thought we could be a really good mix if we did a workshop together. And so it's now become a series. We're also going to go to Iceland in November 23rd. Yeah.
Excellent. Before actually we get into Victoria's, I noticed I had an email question. So This one's from Laura James. I'm curious to know if Monika or Victoria have ever been concerned about people taking their images if they're posting on social media. I know most people don't use watermarks, and wonder if they ever find people using their images. That's a good question.
Oh, yeah. I do put a little watermark just because if people don't put effort into removing it, at least you can track where the photo came from. I have found a couple of mine being used for commercial purposes, and I got some money out of it. So
Yeah.
that ended well. But yeah, I mean, if you put your stuff out there, it can get taken. So it's always low res images that hopefully they can't do anything too much with. But there is ways to get people to take things down or to actually go after them for monetary value.
What about you, Victoria? Have you had any issues with that?
Yeah, I mean, same really as Monica. It can be quite difficult to keep track of things, but I guess if you do put things out there in, pretty low resolution, there's not too much that people can do with them. But I think it's always going to happen, unfortunately, and I've had that happen to me quite a few times. Yeah, and I used to put a watermark on, but now I don't really worry because I figure it's pretty easy to take them off. But yeah, it's a problem. I don't really know how you get around that one.
And for you, Victoria, what else do you have coming up? Any other workshops besides the one that you're doing with Monica?
Yeah, so the two with Monica, so we've got Iceland and the Waterton workshop. And then I also have a Rockies workshop in September and Scotland. We're going to the Isle of Harris and Lewis in November. So still have spots available for all of those. So come and join us.
Yes, so the links are in the chat right now, so be sure to check those out. Also, if you click on those links, they'll take you to their websites where you can see all their social handles and everything and be able to see all the work and hopefully keep in touch with what they have going on. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today to have this discussion. I think there's a lot of really good tips that people can take away on thinking about how they might be able to present themselves and present their photography. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, I want to say thank you so much to all of you that were viewing tonight. It was great to see such a great audience, and we hope that you enjoyed this presentation of TCSTV Live. If you want to check out more of what we have going on, head over to thecamerastore.com under the Events tab. And of course, you can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can catch you again very soon.